My name is Lena, and yes, I'm the woman who canceled her own mother's birthday celebration after she told me I wasn't welcome in her home. But here's what nobody tells you. It was never just about that one day. It was years of subtle put-downs, of being told I wasn't enough, of organizing a party I wasn't even considered part of. Have you ever wondered what it feels like when your own family pushes you so far that the only thing left to do is push back? That's exactly what happened to me. That morning, sunlight spilled weakly through the blinds, casting pale lines across my kitchen counter. I was halfway through arranging a vase of blush peonies when my phone buzzed. Vivian. My mother's name lit up the screen, and my stomach knotted before I even picked up. Her calls rarely came without an expectation tucked inside. "Lena," she greeted, her voice crisp but dipped in just enough sweetness to sound polite. "I need you to make a slight change to the invitations." I dried my hands on a towel. What kind of change? There was a pause. Then, as if she were asking me to fix a minor typo, she said, "Take your name off. There's no need to list yourself as the host. It's not necessary." My chest tightened. I stared at the flowers in front of me, the ones I'd carefully chosen weeks ago to match the party theme, a party I truly believed I was hosting. "Well, technically you are," she continued, "but it's my birthday, sweetheart. People expect me to be the host, not you." She let out a light laugh, the kind meant to wound without sounding unkind. "It's all about appearances." I stood there, the phone tucked to my ear, listening as she effortlessly erased me from my own work. "You still want me to cover the costs, right?" I asked. "Of course," she answered quickly, like that part was a given. "You're so good at this stuff, Lena. I wouldn't trust anyone else." That was Vivian, a woman who could cut you down and compliment you in the same breath. She didn't wait for my reply before launching into a monologue about napkin colors and flower arrangements. When the call ended, I just stared at the screen. She hadn't asked me. She told me. That afternoon, I sat in a quiet cafe in Hollow Creek, the soft whir of the espresso machine in the background. My laptop was open in front of me, the invitation template glowing back at me. There it was, printed in elegant script, hosted by Lena Morgan. My finger hovered over the text, the cursor blinking like it dared me to make the change. I could still hear her voice repeating, "It's just appearances." I highlighted my name and pressed delete. The space left behind looked more than blank. It looked hollow. But I wasn't surprised. This wasn't new. Growing up in Maplewood, it had always been like this. I was the afterthought, the extra piece that never quite fit. I remembered being 8 years old, spending hours painting a birthday card for her. She glanced at it, offered a half smile, then gushed over the silver bracelet my brother Caleb gave her, the one Dad had clearly picked out. My card ended up in the trash before the week ended. Years later, when I graduated top of my class at Ridgecrest University, she barely looked up from her menu at dinner. "That's nice, Lena, but no one really takes a degree in flowers seriously." Only I hadn't studied floral design. I majored in business and marketing. I worked 2 jobs through school, built a successful flower studio in Brookvale from nothing. But to her, I was always just pretending, playing shop. I shut my laptop and leaned back, the chatter of other customers fading into a dull hum. A couple near the window laughed over their coffee. 2 women behind me whispered about PTA drama. All I could hear was my mother's voice. "It's not necessary." That evening, after closing up my shop, I sat in my quiet living room with a glass of cheap red wine. The spring chill still lingered, clinging to the edges of the evening air. I opened my laptop again and pulled up the final version of the invitation. Everything was there, the date, the venue in downtown Maplewood, the RSVP info, the elegant floral design I'd worked on for weeks. Everything, except my name. I stared at that empty space until the screen blurred. Somewhere inside me, something small cracked open. and something fragile cracked open inside me. For years I told myself I could handle her, that this was just who Vivian Hartley was. But that night, staring at the blank space where my name used to be, I asked myself a question I'd never dared to consider. When did I become a guest in my own family? The afternoon sun poured through my windshield as I pulled up in front of my parents' house on Maple Avenue. Maplewood in April looked like a watercolor painting, azaleas in full bloom, the air thick with the perfume of spring. I sat there longer than I should have, fingers tapping the steering wheel, half tempted to turn around and head back to Brookvale. But I knew better. In my family, absence wasn't forgiven. It was recorded, weaponized. By the time I rang the doorbell, it was nearly noon. Behind the thick wooden door, I heard voices and the clinking of silverware, laughter that didn't quite reach the corners of the house. Vivian opened the door with that signature smile she wore whenever she wanted to appear like the perfect hostess. "Lena," she said, eyeing me like I might shatter. "You made it." "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, summoning a smile from somewhere deep. Inside, the dining room was soaked in the scent of roasted chicken and garlic bread. The table was perfectly set, sweet tea sweating in tall glasses, wine already poured. My father, Thomas, sat at the head of the table, silent as always. Caleb and Sienna chatted with Aunt Eloise, their voices just a little too rehearsed, their smiles too careful. Vivian gestured to a chair at the far end. "Sit, dear," just in time. Conversation floated gently over the table. Weather, local politics, Sienna's latest charity gala. When I chimed in with a small suggestion about the party layout, Vivian's smile stiffened. "We've got it handled, darling," she said. "Don't trouble yourself." It stung, but I let it go. I always let it go. Lunch unfolded like every gathering in that house, elegant on the surface, tense underneath. Then, halfway through dessert, Vivian leaned back in her chair, swirling wine in her glass, voice airy and light. "You know," she said to Aunt Eloise, "I always assumed Caleb would be the one who couldn't settle down. But look at him now, married, 2 beautiful kids." She turned to me, her smile thin and pointed. "And Lena? Some people just struggle to keep a marriage." The words landed like a slap. No one looked at me. Not Caleb, not Sienna. My father stared at his plate like he hadn't heard a thing. Aunt Eloise let out an awkward chuckle, but Vivian kept going. "She always had a hard time with commitment," she said, sipping her wine. "Takes after Thomas's side of the family." I smiled because I'd trained myself to. I smiled while a knot tightened in my chest, like a fist wrapping around my lungs. When lunch ended, I slipped quietly into the hallway, needing air. That's when I heard them. Caleb's voice was low, speaking to Sienna. "After the meeting tomorrow, we'll finalize everything." Sienna's reply was soft. "Do you think Lena's going to make a fuss when she finds out?" Caleb's answer was cold. "She's not invited. Mom doesn't want her making things harder." The words landed harder than I expected. A meeting, plans I wasn't even considered for. It shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. By the time I walked back in, the conversation had shifted to small-town elections. No one noticed I'd been gone. Half an hour later, I slipped out. No one stopped me. The drive back to Brookvale felt heavier than usual. The radio played something upbeat, but I didn't hear it. My thoughts looped over every moment, every sideline comment, every time I'd been dismissed. It was never about a party. It never was. It was about being the outsider in my own bloodline. As the highway stretched ahead of me, something cold took root in my chest. I thought the worst had already passed. I was wrong. Nothing could have prepared me for what I'd discover the next weekend. The sky was overcast, soft gray draped over Maplewood like a heavy quilt. Spring's warmth still lingered, but something in the air felt off. Vivian opened the door with her usual forced smile. You're early, she said, stepping aside without warmth. We weren't expecting you until tomorrow. I thought I'd come help finalize a few things, I said, keeping my tone light. Still a lot to wrap up. She nodded shortly, already turning her back. Suit yourself. Inside, the house smelled like lemon polish and dried lavender, the scent of my childhood, but the moment I crossed the threshold, a chill slid beneath my skin. Not from the air conditioning, but something colder, deeper. Caleb and Sienna were in the living room, scrolling through their phones. They looked up, offered small, polite smiles, and went right back to their screens without saying a word. The same quiet tension from the previous weekend clung to the walls like humidity. Your room's still upstairs, Vivian called over her shoulder from the kitchen. I carried my overnight bag up the staircase, the wood creaking under my feet like it remembered me too well. When I pushed open the door to my old bedroom, I stopped. Everything was gone. The posters I'd carefully taped up in high school, gone. The books I'd left behind, the journals, the mismatched pillows, all of it. The bedspread was different now, patterned in blue and gray dinosaurs. In the corner, a small suitcase and a pile of brightly colored toys. For a second, I thought I'd stepped into the wrong room. Then I saw the photo on the nightstand, Caleb's youngest, grinning in a soccer uniform. Downstairs, I found Vivian arranging a vase of lilies in the kitchen. What happened to my room? I asked, my voice thinner than I intended. She didn't look up. We converted it. Caleb's kids need the space when they visit. You didn't think to tell me? Finally, she met my eyes. Calm, cool, and dismissive. You don't live here anymore, Lena. It's just a room. Just a room. I nodded, swallowing the sting in her words, and turned before she could see the slump in my shoulders. That evening, we sat around the kitchen table, supposedly reviewing the party menu, but it was clear. I was only there to listen. Every suggestion I made, an appetizer swap, a different wine pairing, was met with a wave of her hand. Lena, I appreciate your enthusiasm, she said, glancing toward Sienna, who barely hid her smirk. But this kind of event requires a certain level of sophistication. Trust me, you wouldn't understand. Her tone was soft, but her words left cuts. Later, after Caleb and Sienna vanished into the guest room and the conversation had wilted, I slipped out the back door. The evening air was thick with jasmine and freshly cut grass. I sat on the porch steps, staring up at the sliver of sky between the trees. It wasn't about the room. It wasn't about the party. It was about all the ways she'd made me smaller, year after year, until there was barely any room left for me at all. I'd done everything right. The grades, the piano recitals, a steady growing business. I'd tried to be enough, but it never mattered. Not next to Caleb, not to her. That night, with crickets singing in the background and the maplewood breeze brushing against my skin, something in me shifted, solidified. I told myself it couldn't get worse, but I was wrong. The real fracture was still coming, and I never saw it coming. The following weekend arrived under a sky that looked ready to fall. Maplewood spring had turned soggy. Clouds sagged low, heavy with rain. As I pulled up outside my parents' house again, the windshield wipers struggled to keep up with the steady downpour. I hadn't planned on returning so soon. After what happened last time, I told myself I was done. But Vivian had called midweek, her voice drenched in sugary politeness, asking if I could just swing by to help confirm a few final details with the vendors. And like a fool, I said yes. By late Saturday afternoon, the rain still hadn't let up. Everything about the house looked the same, but felt heavier, like the walls had absorbed the tension and decided to hold on to it. Vivian was in the kitchen, fussing with the same arrangement of lilies that had somehow become her signature. "Don't forget to check with the florist," she said flatly, not bothering to look up as I set my overnight bag by the stairs. They're still confused about the colors. I nodded, even though I'd already emailed them twice this week. I dropped my overnight bag by the stairs as Vivian kept talking, not missing a beat. They're still messing up the floral palette, she said. I nodded, even though I'd already emailed the florist twice that week. Across the kitchen, Sienna sat at the breakfast bar scrolling through her phone. When I greeted her, she barely looked up. The entire weekend felt like wet fabric stuck to my skin. Uncomfortable, inescapable. Every suggestion I made about the party, from the menu to the playlist to the lighting, was quietly dismissed. I already spoke with the caterer, Vivian would say, or Sienna had a better idea. By Saturday night, I was running on fumes. After dinner, I excused myself under the pretense of double-checking the vendor list, but really, I just needed air. Any air that didn't taste like quiet rejection. The rain outside had softened into a slow, rhythmic drizzle. I walked toward the kitchen, hoping to make a cup of tea before bed. That's when I heard them. Voices low, sharp around the edges, trickling through the half-closed pantry door. She's always been a burden, Vivian said. Her voice had that same polished cruelty she used at church brunches, poised, charming, and quietly devastating. Everything is just so difficult around her. I froze, my fingers curling around the doorframe, knuckles whitening. She's exhausting, my mother continued. The emotions, the drama. I told Sienna to keep an eye on her. Lord knows she could still ruin the party. Then Sienna's voice, soft but sure, I'll make sure she stays in line. A crack echoed through me, not physical, but deep, like glass breaking quietly under pressure. I stepped back slowly, careful not to let the floor creak. My lungs tightened. I couldn't catch my breath. That moment didn't wound me. It clarified me. This wasn't a new hurt. It was the confirmation of a truth I'd been too loyal to admit. I wasn't their daughter. I was the problem. The rain tapped harder against the windows as I slipped out the back door, unnoticed. The night smelled of wet earth and pavement. I walked to the edge of the backyard, past the old swing set my father built when I was 10. I stopped just before the fence, letting the rain soak into my hair, down my spine. I stared at the wooden panels like they held answers to questions I had carried since childhood. Too emotional? Too sensitive? Too loud? Too much? And now, at 37, I had finally heard it out loud. I was a burden. That night, once the house had gone quiet and the lights were out, I sat at the guest room window, listening to the rain like 1,000 tiny drums. My mind spun in list form, vendors, invoices, contracts. Every detail of this party was tied to me, my time, my energy. And for the first time, I let myself ask, what would happen if I just stopped? As the rain slid down the glass, I realized something that shook me more than anything else had. I was done. Done trying to be the version of a daughter she needed. Done trying to fit into a family that never left room for me. The rain had long stopped by the time I left Maplewood that Sunday, but the storm inside me hadn't. The next few days in Brookvale passed in a blur, managing the shop, chatting with Tanya over morning coffee, but my thoughts always drifted back to that night. Those words, that truth I couldn't unhear, burden, exhausting, too much. By midweek, the countdown to Vivian's birthday party was down to 2 weeks. I told myself I could finish this, tie it all up neatly, walk away with dignity. That Saturday, I arrived earlier than usual. The late spring humidity clung to the air like it didn't want to let go. As I pulled into the driveway, my heart sank. The street was packed, a rental van from the caterer, the florist delivery truck, 2 unfamiliar cars. Something wasn't right. Inside, the house buzzed with activity. I barely had time to put my bag down before I saw it. The tablecloths in the dining room, navy blue. Not the soft ivory I had spent hours selecting. The floral centerpieces were huge and clumsy, loud, garish, Nothing like the minimalist arrangements I designed. Even the layout of the tables was different. Chairs crammed together, suffocating the space. I stopped one of the caterers as they walked past. Wait, what's going on? These aren't the linens I ordered. The woman glanced at me, confused. Your mother said you changed your mind. My stomach dropped. I walked toward the living room, heart pounding harder with every step, and there she was. Vivian was by the fireplace, directing one of the florists like a general surveying her troops. When she noticed me, she offered the faintest smile, like I was late to my own obligation. You're here, she said, more observation than welcome. We made a few changes, nothing major. I swallowed hard, steadying my voice. You changed everything without telling me. She waved a dismissive hand. Don't be dramatic, Lena. You always make things more complicated than they need to be. I fixed it. The heat rose in my chest, my hands curling at my sides. You didn't fix it, I said. You undermined me. She turned then, eyes sharp and cool. Oh, honey, don't make this about you. This party is more important than your little event planning hobby. My breath caught in my throat. Hobby. As if I hadn't spent years building my business from the ground up. As if I hadn't worked weddings, fundraisers, corporate galas, events I made flawless while my own family couldn't see past the label they'd slapped on me. Not serious, not enough. I glanced around the room. Caleb and Sienna stood near the kitchen, pretending not to listen, but I saw the stiffness in their shoulders. I stepped closer to my mother, my voice low but steady. This is the last time, Vivian. If you keep treating me like I don't matter, like everything I do is some joke, I'll walk away. Her smile turned razor sharp. Don't be ridiculous, she said. You'll do what you always do. Fall in line. Those words hit harder than I thought they would, but this time they didn't break me. They lit something. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the room, the heat of their silence trailing behind me. That night, I sat on the edge of the guest room bed, phone in hand, fingers trembling slightly as I texted Tanya. Me, if I disappear before the party, don't be surprised. Her response came fast. Tanya, you okay? I stared at the screen for a while, then typed, me, not yet. But I will be. I set my phone down and opened my laptop. Vendor lists, payment confirmations, contracts, all of it stared back at me. Every string holding this party together ran through me, and for the first time, I let myself imagine cutting them. That night, as I left the kitchen and walked back toward the guest room, something in me shifted. I'd been warning her for years, softly, silently, pleading in the spaces between the lines. I was done with that. The next week dragged like a weight strapped to my shoulders. Back in Brookvale, I reopened the flower shop. I smiled at customers, took orders, made arrangements, but each smile felt more like a performance. Fragile, brittle. My phone buzzed constantly, vendors confirming delivery times, final payments, playlist revisions. I answered each message. I followed every detail, but in the back of my mind, her words replayed like a loop. You'll do what you always do. Fall in line. By Friday afternoon, just 1 week before the party, I realized I had to go back. Not because I wanted to be there, but because I needed to see how far she'd go. The sun bore down hard that day. Maplewood's air was thick and heavy, suffocating. The moment I walked into the house, the tension hit me square in the chest. My father sat in the living room, pretending to read the newspaper. Caleb and Sienna whispered by the kitchen island, their voices low. No one looked up. I didn't pause. I went straight to the dining room, and there it was. Again. Everything was different. The place cards were rearranged. The flowers were bigger, louder, gaudy. The playlist notes I'd carefully left on the counter, gone. Replaced by a scribbled list in Vivian's handwriting. I turned on my heel and headed for the kitchen. Vivian stood at the stove, stirring something with more force than necessary. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Can we talk?" She didn't look at me. If it's about the party, I've already made a few tweaks. I swallowed the heat rising in my throat. "You changed everything again," without saying a word. She finally looked up, her smile tight and unbothered. "Lena, it's my party. You make everything so complicated. I just simplified it." I took a breath, forcing it to stay even. "You don't get to erase my work. You don't get to treat me like I'm some inconvenience." Her smile disappeared, her eyes sharpening into ice. "Oh, honey," she said, quiet and cutting. "You've always been the inconvenience." The room fell silent. Caleb and Sienna froze by the sink. My father finally looked up from the paper, but said nothing. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. "I'm warning you," I said, my voice shaking now. No matter how hard I tried to hold it steady. "Keep treating me like this. I won't stay." She snorted, waving me off like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "This is my house. My party," Vivian said sharply. "If you can't behave like a guest, then don't bother staying at all." Her words didn't just dismiss me, they erased me. I stared at her, heart pounding. "I'm serious," I said, voice cracking despite myself. She crossed her arms, eyes like stone. "So am I. You want to act like an outsider? Fine. You don't belong here anyway." Silence settled over the room like fog. Caleb said nothing. Sienna said nothing. Even my father, Thomas, didn't look up. I stood there a moment longer, hoping, begging, for someone to say something, to step in, to acknowledge this wasn't okay. No one did. So I walked out. The front door clicked shut behind me like the final nail in a coffin. I sat in my car, hands trembling against the steering wheel. The air was thick and humid. I could barely breathe. It felt like the walls of my chest were closing in. I picked up my phone, opened the party schedule, and hit delete. One by one, every file, every folder, every document, gone. For years, I'd let her shrink me, reshape me, redefine me into something more convenient. But that night, sitting alone in my car, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. As I drove away from the house, the question wasn't if I would leave. It was how far I was willing to go. The road back to Brookvale stretched long beneath my headlights. Somewhere around Millridge, the storm finally broke. Rain fell in heavy sheets, splattering the windshield like pebbles. My phone sat on the passenger seat, silent and dark, but I couldn't stop glancing at it. My stomach twisted with a slow, sick churn. Between mile marker 83 and the county line, I picked it up. I typed the first message. "Me. Dad. I didn't deserve that tonight." I stared at it for a long time. Then I sent another. "Me. Caleb. Do you really think I ruined everything?" I didn't expect replies. I didn't even know if I wanted them. But I needed to ask. I needed to hear the silence for what it really was. The rain came harder as I drove the final stretch. By the time I pulled into my apartment lot, the dashboard clock blinked 11:46 p.m. The storm hadn't let up. I sat there in the car, watching water trail down the windshield like years slipping past me. Just after midnight, my phone buzzed. "Dad, Thomas Hartley. Your mother had a rough day. Just let it go. A rough day." I let the message sit on the screen, glowing brighter than the streetlights outside. By morning, Caleb's reply arrived. "Caleb Hartley, it's best not to escalate things. You know how she is. No apology, no acknowledgement, just caution dressed up as concern." Sienna didn't respond at all. The weight of their silence settled over me like wet cement. Not one of them had thought to say, "You didn't deserve that." Not one of them said, "I see you." It wasn't just Vivian anymore. It was all of them. By noon, the rain outside had softened to a drizzle. I sat on the couch, phone in one hand, the other wrapped around my knee as I scrolled back through old messages. Birthday texts, holiday reminders, check-ins, polite, transactional, hollow. Not a single one asking how I was really doing. Not one saying, "I'm proud of you." The realization was sharp, bitter, final. It was never about the party. Not really. It was about the fact that, when it came down to it, none of them would choose me. I set the phone down and opened my laptop. The event planning software loaded, a clean dashboard blinking back at me, empty now that the schedule was gone. But the vendor contracts were still there, every one of them. I clicked open the folder. Vivian, 65th venue, catering, florist, band, valet, photographer. Every single one was tied to my business account. And so I began drafting emails. Calm, professional, direct. Request to cancel, to release, to refund. Every clause referenced, every detail considered. I'd done this 100 times before, just never for myself. By the time the morning sun spilled through my window, I had already decided, if they didn't want me in the family, then they were about to feel what my absence really looked like. If they wanted me out of the family, I would make sure they felt the weight of my absence. The morning sun spilled into my apartment as if nothing had happened. The sky above Brookvale was a sharp, cloudless blue. Birds chirped outside my window, and the hum of downtown traffic drifted up from the street below. You wouldn't have known, looking at that peaceful scene, that I was about to dismantle a celebration that had taken 3 months to build. In the kitchen, I stirred sugar into my coffee with a calm that felt clinical. My laptop was already open on the counter. The folder was sitting there, waiting. Vivian, 65th. Vendor contracts. I took one last sip of coffee, sat down, and began. It took under 10 minutes to cancel the caterer, 12 to contact the florist and resend the cancellation, 15 to revoke the band's booking. Each message was polite, efficient, and absolute. Please confirm cancellation and initiate the refund process under our standard agreement. Due to unforeseen circumstances, we will no longer require your services. The venue was trickier. They needed a formal release of responsibility, a waiver. I signed it without a second thought. By 11 a.m., and the party no longer existed, I closed my laptop and stood in the silence of my apartment. It felt too quiet, the kind of stillness that comes after a door slams. Then my phone started buzzing. First, a message from the florist. Vivian Hartley is trying to reach you. She's asking about payment. Do we forward her the invoice? Then a missed call from the band. Your mother said you were still coordinating. Can you confirm? Then an email from the caterer. We need a new payment method or we'll cancel delivery. The dominoes began falling faster than I could read them. By noon, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Tanya finally texted, "Hey, are you okay? Maplewood's losing its mind. People are talking." I didn't answer. I just sat back on the couch, watching the messages pile up like storm clouds gathering. It didn't take long for the panic to echo through Maplewood's social circles. First, a Facebook post from a distant cousin. Anyone know why Vivian Hartley's birthday bash got called off? Heard the venue canceled. Then another, the party of the year. Suddenly not happening? Something's up. I knew how fast gossip spread in that town, like red wine on white linen. And of course, Vivian fought back. By late afternoon, her voicemails were clogging my inbox. Lena, this is childish. Call me back. We can fix this. Lena, don't be dramatic. Do you know how this looks? You're embarrassing the family. I didn't listen to the rest. At around 5 p.m., as the sun dipped low and turned the sky to gold, I sent one final message. Me, Vivian, you wanted me out. Now your party is out too. Happy birthday. I didn't expect a response. I stared at the screen, waiting for something. Anger, guilt, even relief. but all I felt was a quiet emptiness. That night, I sat on my porch in Brookvale with a glass of wine. The spring air was cool, brushing gently against my skin. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel suffocating. As I watched the storm I had unleashed twist its way through my family, I wondered what would be left standing when the dust finally settled. A month passed like a wound beneath a bandage, quiet and slow, like healing you don't dare look at too soon. The gossip in Maplewood hadn't died down, not even close. Word traveled fast there, faster than reason, faster than truth. I heard from old classmates, from vendors, even from customers at the flower shop. Did you really cancel your mother's party? Is it true what they're saying? That you did it on purpose? People love a scandal, especially when it doesn't belong to them. I didn't answer. I just kept arranging lilies and roses, cutting stems, tying ribbons, moving forward, one bloom at a time. Back in Maplewood, the dust refused to settle. Tanya forwarded me a clipping from the town society column. Marquee birthday event for Vivian Hartley abruptly canceled. Rumors of family discord swirl. She told me over coffee that Vivian had been furious, embarrassed mostly, and unwilling to give anyone the truth. She's telling people you had a breakdown, Tanya said, raising an eyebrow. I just smiled. Maybe I had. Maybe a breakdown is exactly what freedom looks like when you've spent your whole life swallowing yourself. My father never called. Neither did Caleb. Sienna, predictably, stayed silent. And honestly, their absence was louder than any words they could have spoken. By mid-June, the hydrangeas outside my apartment window in Brookvale had started to bloom. Fat, blue clusters catching the light like they were soaking up every drop of warmth the world could spare. And quietly, something inside me had started to bloom too. I signed a lease on a new space, a bigger one, right on the corner of Birch and Main. Hartley and Vine, Brookvale's full-service floral boutique. For the first time, my name was on the door, not hidden in the fine print, not shoved to the corner of a business card. It was mine. The weeks that followed were a blur of paint rollers, shelves, and unpacked boxes of valises and ribbon. Tanya showed up every weekend with coffee and takeout, shaking her head every time I second-guessed the layout. You don't need to make it perfect, she said one Saturday, wiping sweat from her brow. You already are. It wasn't until a Tuesday morning, about a month after the party that never was, that the letter arrived. Plain white envelope, no return address, but the Maplewood postmark gave it away. My heart clenched before I even opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, my mother's handwriting, still sharp, still painfully neat. I don't understand why you did what you did, but you're still my daughter. That hasn't changed. No apology, no reflection, just 6 cold lines written in the same script I'd spent a lifetime trying to please. I folded the letter neatly, placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk, and closed it. Without a word. Weeks passed. The shop opened strong. Locals came in for fresh-cut stems. Couples booked wedding consultations. Children came in with crumpled bills, asking for a single daisy. Life moved forward. But sometimes, on those quiet evenings, when the store was closed and the street outside sat still, I'd find myself thinking about that letter. Was it her version of an olive branch or a leash? The truth is, it didn't matter anymore, because somewhere between deleting that party and unlocking the doors to my own shop, I finally learned something. Freedom isn't fixing what's broken. It's walking away from what's breaking you. And if you've stayed with me through this entire story, maybe you're wondering, was it worth it? Burning it all down, just to finally breathe? Here's my answer. Sometimes, freedom costs more than you imagined. Sometimes it looks nothing like forgiveness. Sometimes it looks like finally choosing yourself, even if no one else ever will. For too long, I thought love meant sacrificing without limits. That family meant shrinking myself to fit someone else's comfort. But here's what I know now. You are not obligated to keep setting yourself on fire just to keep others warm, especially not when they never asked if you were burning. If you're watching this and you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, like no matter how much you give, it's never enough, I hope my story reminds you, you are enough. You've always been enough. And maybe the day you stop begging for a seat at the table is the first day you finally taste freedom. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you love? Not because you stopped loving them, but because you finally started loving yourself? Or maybe you're still standing at that crossroads, wondering if it's okay to choose peace over approval. Tell me in the comments. If this story touched something in you, drop a or simply type "I'm enough." Let me know where you're watching from. And if this story wasn't for you, that's okay too. Tell me why. Let's talk about it. If you want to hear more real, raw stories about family, forgiveness, and freedom, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next.